Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. It's another Monday morning at 10 a.m. We are live. We are streaming on Facebook, on Activist Post, our wonderful content partner. So facebook.com/Activist Post. We are streaming on YouTube, youtube.com/Vin Armani. And we are also streaming today for the first time on Twitter, on Periscope. So that's directly in all of those feeds. We'll see how it turns out today. I want to thank everybody who has tuned in. I think this is now our 5th show. We've had some amazing guests. We've covered a lot of great issues. I thank all of the people who have shared, especially right now, and as we'll discuss today, the most important thing that you can do is share our content. If there's something that you like, if there's something that you find interesting, share it, comment on it. We read all the comments. We see everything that you guys are doing. And I just want to thank everybody who has supported and who has also reached out and given us some interesting tips and commentary on things that they would like to see. Today we have a very important show. Usually we cover a series of news items, and today there's just one that we're going to focus on in the first hour. That is fake news, this whole fake news controversy. It's very, very important, and we really want to get to the root of it. Also, I'm super excited for our guest today. We have JD Sawyer. He is from Colorado Aquaponics and the Aquaponics Source. We're going to talk about aquaponics. Last week we talked about Bitcoin, and I told you that there are several technologies that I believe are just clutch in terms of delivering individual liberty and increasing the amount of freedom and control that you have over your life. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is definitely one of them. The other one, and one that I really is close to my heart, is aquaponics. And we will get into what that is, but fundamentally it's a way for you to grow your own food, your own vegetables and fish in a very technologically advanced but simple to implement way. So for your health in terms of organic food security, for those people who have a little bit of fear about the way that things may go, either economically or governments or whatever, it's an amazing technology. It's an amazing solution. It's something that is going to, I think, excite you. And that's in our second hour. So to get right into what we've got, I want to introduce to you, since we're talking about news today, I guess he's the Woodward to my Bernstein, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian, good morning.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Vin. It's great to be here today.
So it's gotten a little cold in Vegas. We're sitting in here sort of chilling in the studio, like literally chilling. I wanted to, before I forget, because I did not do this last week, but people have been asking me about they're like, what's behind Christian? What is that? Is it like perfume? But they can't really tell. So Christian is an artist, and in sort of many mediums. I mean, this studio is basically his creation. But why don't you pull back? One of the things you do is bottles. That's actually how we started working together. Some of those are my vodka bottles. You don't need to grab. Yeah, grab. Show. Well, that one's mine. Nobody cares about my vodka. Shameless plug.
That's the good stuff,
baby
right
vodka. That is the bomb diggity. But show them some of this bottle art.
This is all either airbrushed or engraved or even screen printed, and let's see,
with the Christian Reyes signature, signature bottle line,
and. It's just kind of a project that we started, about 2 years ago?
I think it's been about 2 years.
Yeah, and the idea was to do a totally custom designed liquor bottle to make it personal, to make it, really elegant.
Being here in Vegas, I mean, this is like a liquor town. It's a drinking town. So, and I like to drink.
So everything, well, not with this bottle in particular, but we could get fully custom. We were working with Las Vegas Distillery, and they were producing a fully custom recipe, and then also with your baby vodka, a very elegant recipe as well. And the idea was to make it totally custom, totally personal, and artistic, a piece of art inside a bottle. So,
and there you have it. So now you guys know. Now you guys know what's back there. Hey, go ahead and toss it on back there. So today, though, Christian, what I want to get into is, the election had just ended on our last show, but it's been a week now of the analysis, right? One of the things that I found most interesting, there were a few stats, and before we get into this fake news thing, because I think that they are part of this whole discussion. The first thing that I found interesting was this idea about, and I think that we actually have a thing about the number of people who didn't vote. So basically, there are 231 million eligible voters in the United States. But it appears that over 130 million actually voted for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Meanwhile, 90 million decided to disregard their vote entirely and didn't show up at the polls. So if you look at this, it really is almost like a 50-50, that 50% of eligible voters just did not vote at all. And now, was that because the choices were two choices that were no good in terms of Clinton and Trump? Or are people just completely disillusioned with the process? This is the question that we need to ask. I mean, the other stat that I found interesting, and it's going to be, I think, important to this discussion as we move forward, so I want to address it. If you want to jump to that voter stat here. So this is from CBS News. As expected, Trump did best among white voters without a college degree, beating Clinton by the enormous margin of 72% to 23%. So basically, if you were white and you didn't have a college degree, I mean, 72 for her to only get 23, not even a quarter of white American voters without a college degree, which, I mean, that's a huge percentage of the population, right? Trump also won among white, non-college educated women, 62 to 34%. And so that's, I mean, women, right? The whole thing was this is the first female president, but women did not sway them. They did not care if they didn't have a college degree. And white college-educated men, 54 to 39%. Among white voters, Clinton only won among women with a college degree by 51 to 45% margin. Interestingly, among white voters, there is no evidence in the exit poll that income affected the likelihood that they supported Trump. So Christian, this is really interesting.
Very interesting.
Really interesting. So Hillary Clinton played identity politics in this whole situation, right? You would think with identity politics that a white woman would win white women outright, no matter what.
Right.
That should seem like a fucking slam dunk.
Yeah.
Right? That's like Obama losing the black vote.
Yeah, that's
losing
crazy.
the black male vote. Could you imagine? Could you think about that? That a white woman to lose how hard do you have to work to lose the vote of the people who are you?
Right. And it just shows that people are really waking up and they are becoming aware. They're looking beyond, okay, she's just she's a woman and I got to see beyond that now. I got to see actually what's going on. What are her ethics? What's going on with her campaign? And
well. But I think that gets right to the point of this whole thing. Because that's not what the media says. That's not what the mainstream media has been trying to find. Well, do you remember last week we had that Van Jones clip?
Yeah.
And Van Jones said this was a white lash.
Right, yeah.
It was a white lash against a black president. And it's like, but if you're losing, so was it a female lash against it? How do you square that? If the white women aren't even voting for a white woman?
That should be a given. It should be like, okay, just because of that, they're going to be more intrigued, more into voting. And I think,
I mean, she didn't even the college educated women. That stat, throw the stat back up real quick. With women with a college degree She won. She barely got over 50%, over half of them. She barely got that. It's not like she ran away. It's like people could say, "Oh, it's because she didn't get she got the non-college educated, it was the college educated women but they really didn't. They only went for her by about 50%. You could take that off. So the media, though, the mainstream media, and the reason that this came to our attention was, so we did our show on Monday, and then on Tuesday, we wake up. Now, it's definitely not related to our show, but in some ways it is. On Tuesday, we wake up, and all of a sudden, here are all of these stories about fake news.
Yep.
Fake news. So this is very, very interesting. It's our first and only story today. Fake news. This was a very interesting experience for me. I don't know that there has ever been a time where the media has presented this sort of narrative. First Amendment, that's the first thing I want to talk about. The First Amendment, the Bill of Rights. The most important, the founders of this country, the most important rights: freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of the press. We'll get into what freedom of the press means, but that's very, very important to consider. And to understand why those three are important. And to also understand the context in which they put those rights down. They put those rights down because those were the rights that were being taken away from them. This is part of the reason why they were breaking away from an authoritarian monarchy, right? So you would think that the press would be particularly protective of the freedom of the press and would not want to infringe on that in any way or even start down that path. You would think that. But let's see what the mainstream media had to say this week on the fake news front. CBS News. There were different veins of the way that this story was covered. This was the first sort of story that carried. This is Facebook fake news creator claims he put Trump in the White House. This guy, Paul Horner, some 38-year-old dude who they're claiming built a fake news empire on Facebook. He claims he put Trump in the White House. A guy making fake news, 38 years old. That's who put Trump in the White House. Never mind all of the other people who were supporters of Trump. Never mind the people who voted for him. Never mind the fact that Trump, maybe he ran a pretty good campaign. He certainly ran a historic campaign. No. It was a 38-year-old guy writing fake news. That's who put him. He claims he put him in the White House, and then CBS goes ahead and they follow that up because they believe it. Next. Here we go. Fake news. Trump backers boycott Pepsi because of some fake news. Keep next. This is also CBS. CNN. How to fix the fake news problem. Look at that headline underneath the video. Plague of fake news is getting worse. There's a plague of fake news. There's a fake news problem. It's interesting. We had never heard of this problem until Donald Trump won. There was no problem. Okay, next. The Guardian. Fake news clampdown. Google. $150,000 to fact-checking projects. Funding comes amid debate about role of the search engine in spreading bogus content, fake news. Next. Mashable. Fake news has gotten so bad, Obama had to weigh in. It's so bad the president's talking about it. It's funny, it got bad. Before this, there was no fake news. Next. Mashable. Fake news writer takes reluctant credit for Trump's win. Now remember, this is the narrative about the guy, Paul Horner. Next. NPR. Hate speech to fake news. The content crisis facing Mark Zuckerberg. There's a content crisis now. There's a crisis. This is NPR. Next. Fake news in the U.S. election. Elsewhere, that's nothing new. This brings it on to an international level. This is New York Times. Next. New York Times again. Obama with Angela Merkel in Berlin assails the spread of fake news. PBS. How online hoaxes and fake news played a role in the election. Politico. Obama says we must guard against fake news. Salon says, people are definitely dumber. Thanks to Facebook, a viral fake news writer is making $10,000 a month. Paul Horner also takes credit for putting Donald Trump in the White House. The Verge, Obama criticizes the spread of fake news on Facebook. USA Today, report fake election news performed better than real news on Facebook. This one's interesting. And then you see in the video there, the little clip we've got, he tells you what sites he's talking about that are fake news. I'm talking about sites like InfoWars, led by Alex Jones. Next. This is Us Weekly even. Us Weekly. Tabloid. Fake news outperformed real news on Facebook during run-up to Election Day. So basically you've got, so far, Christian, we've got Paul Horner writing fake news. We've got Obama weighing in, and we've got the idea that fake news had more engagements.
Right.
Fake news had more engagements on it than real news.
Which makes you think a little bit.
Right. Well, next, I think the next story, oh no, we're not even, Variety, for crying out loud. This is like entertainment news. President Obama chimes in on fake news phenomenon. Here's this one. Warns it could weaken democracy. Now, first off, not weaken the U.S., not weaken the whole idea of democracy. That there is somebody putting, first off, they aren't even defining fake news yet, but we will get to that. Next. Okay, so here we go. This is the last on these slides, but we can kind of show. So basically, the top 20 fake news stories outperformed real news at the end of the 2016 campaign. Basically, what they're talking about is on Facebook, the engagements, which is what used to be, the thumbs up like, but now you can do any of those emoticons, right? It could be what are they? It could be a thumbs up, it could be a heart for love, and it could be what's the other, the angry face or whatever, right? And also comments. But here's the thing. So you can kind of see the graphic down in the bottom where so you've got the engagement and how the mainstream news lost it, but this quote unquote fake news, which they're grouping a bunch of things into, which we're going to talk about, that got the most engagements. Now, here's the thing. I know from my own experience, and people who are on Facebook, and Christian, you've probably experienced this yourself. When you have a fake news story that one of your friends, say, posts, like somebody posts a news story, I usually, unless it's something that really, really matters to me, I usually am not even commenting on it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to like it. I'm not going to comment on it. Even if I read it, I might not comment on it. I might just go and just click on it and read it. That's not actually an engagement. A click is not an engagement.
Right.
Engagements are somebody doing something, a like, a comment,
share.
et cetera, et cetera. Right. So if there's a fake news story, though, that I see pop up that one of my friends did that I know is fake, usually myself and probably several other people, they'll post a link to Snopes or something. They'll be like, that's fake, that's debunked, whatever. Those usually have a big, long set of engagements because it's engagements of people saying that it's fake. So to say that fake news gets more engagement sort of per capita is like, yeah, of course it does. Because it's people calling out the fact that it's not real.
Yeah,
So to say that there's a fake news problem because it's getting engagements is actually, the engagements prove that there's already a social self-regulation
Right.
about things that are hoaxes. Like, hoaxes get called out really, really fast.
the one I can think of right now, it was a couple years back, and it was the one where like Apple took a bunch of nickels, and
Wait, what was this?
Apple paid Samsung in a bunch of nickels,
Oh my god!
and it was
On a lawsuit or something like
Yeah.
that. Wow.
and eventually people came out and said it was it was a hoax, it was debunked, but
Of course.
but
Yeah.
and the celebrity ones, you see all those all the time too. Well, a couple years back you did, but this gets really interesting because the quote unquote real news is lashing out, so to speak, or they're
Well, the question is, are they responding to something? Like, do they know? Do they really believe that there's a problem? Or is this just, are they making it up? Or who's behind it? I mean, I want to get into the who's behind it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because there has been a response, right? First response has been from mainstream news. And it doesn't get much more mainstream than New York Times. And here's what New York Times had to say this week regarding, and it's directly regarding this. We have that New York Times? Okay. As we reflect on the momentous result and the months of reporting and polling that preceded it, they're talking about the election. We aim to rededicate ourselves to the fundamental mission of Times journalism. That is to report America and the world honestly, without fear or favor, striving always to understand and reflect all political perspectives and life experiences in the stories that we bring to you. It is also to hold power to account impartially and unflinchingly. I wonder, like, does this mean if you put this out and you say, we're going to rededicate ourselves to the fundamentals of journalism, rededicate ourselves to the fundamental mission of Times journalism, to report America and the world honestly. Does this mean that you were not reporting? You were not reporting honestly before? Why do you need to rededicate yourself to that? Isn't that what you've been supposedly doing this whole time? Or is the Times saying that they were perhaps engaging in fake news? Perhaps. Google also had a statement. Not so nice. Moving forward, we will restrict ad serving on pages that misrepresent, misstate, or conceal information about the publisher, the publisher's content, or the primary purpose of the web property. Stay on this for a second, but Christian, I want to talk about this because I want to analyze this statement a little bit here. So, Google Ads is the source of revenue for a lot of sites, period,
Yep.
blogs. And I mean, Google Ads is a primary revenue source in terms of ad serving. Many, many places have Google Ads, including Activist Post. Now, this is a pretty broad restrict ad serving on pages that misrepresent, misstate, or conceal information. Okay. Misrepresent, which would be, I guess that what is being represented is not actually the case. Misstate, is that misrepresent? Is there a difference between misstate? I really don't know. Or conceal information about the publisher, the publisher's content, or the primary purpose of the web property. So, conceal information about the publisher, like how deep does that go?
Yeah.
Do you have to say every single investor that you have? Like,
and I want to see the fine lines on that too, because
well, I think that it's so broad. It's
Yeah,
almost like they
it's-
don't need a fine line. It's just like it's their editorial discretion, right? Or the primary purpose of the web property. Like, what the fuck does that even mean?
yeah, it's very confusing. And if you look at majority of the mainstream media, what do you have? It falls right in that category. Every single one of those things.
I believe that.
Yeah, every single one of them. And to me, it's like, okay, are they going to put a stop on the ads for the?
Well, I'll give you an example of something that happened here, Christian. The Las Vegas Review Journal,
Yeah.
right? You can pop back to us. You can take it off this now. Las Vegas Review Journal recently purchased by Sheldon Adelson. But do you remember that when he had just purchased it, that Sheldon Adelson owned it, but they were not revealing who the owner was? Do you remember that story?
No, I never caught that story.
Yeah, it was here.
Interesting.
So what I'm wondering is like, at what level does that stop? It just seems like Google is leaving it open to a lot of abuse by individual people within Google. It's giving a lot of leeway.
That basically says Google is going to pick and choose which ones that they want to allow to have ads and eliminate.
Well, we see this happening. This is why it's dangerous. When you're talking about Facebook and Google in particular. So Facebook, when you talk about news, I believe the stat that I saw was people who were asked what their primary source for news is, 44% said their Facebook feed.
Yeah.
And then Google was like, I think Google was maybe like 20%, Twitter was like 10%, something like that. When you have these private companies that, what we're talking about is pretty much a majority of people are receiving their information, are being informed as a citizen through these outlets. When these outlets start taking a proactive, because look, there's a huge difference between, let's say there's somebody on Facebook, there's all of these complaints, right? To where the complaints really outnumber, say, the engagements. Somebody's just complaining like spam.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody complains about spam and they remove that spam account. They ban that person, they block them, whatever. They blacklist them, Twitter, if they just get a whole bunch of complaints about somebody's harassing or whatever, then they can look into that claim and go. But when you have them talking about, and what they're talking about are algorithms.
Yep.
And Zuckerberg started talking about, algorithms of, and we have a little bit more about this, these proactive algorithms. Zuckerberg put out a statement, and he had said, I may have it here, but he had said, this is, let's see. No, I don't have it. I will tell you, essentially, he put out a statement saying that what they're looking to do is to find a way to find and eliminate fake news, quote unquote, before people even flag it. So basically to have some algorithm that looks and says, oh, this is probably fake news, and we're gone. Now, these algorithms are not effective. We actually, last week, people who were watching on Facebook, some of them lost our feed. Ironically, right? They lost our feed. Why did they lose our feed? Well, they lost our feed because when we were reporting on CNN creating fake news, we were playing clips from CNN. Now, how copyright law works is when you are making a commentary on a piece of content, it falls under what's called fair use. It's the reason why, say, The Daily Show or the Corbett Report or Tosh.0 or one of these, why they can show news from somebody that they don't like and criticize it, and that company can't shut them down, right? Like Daily Show can go in on Fox News and O'Reilly all day long, and O'Reilly can't file a cease and desist because it falls under fair use. Now, here's the problem. Facebook, as we were showing these CNN clips, Facebook's algorithm is looking, and it sees, oh, there's the CNN logo. And it thinks that we might be pirating the CNN's feed and
like
rebroadcasting it, right? We weren't. We were broadcasting a past clip. Under copyright law, it's fine under fair use. But when you're dealing with these private companies and you're in their private walled garden, copyright law doesn't even matter. They're not taking it down because of a copyright claim. Which is a little different than Google and YouTube. Like, so for instance, if you put up a YouTube video that has a song in it that's in the database of YouTube's songs that are owned by someone else, you'll get a notice saying that it's been flagged. And they'll take it down.
Yep.
That's a copyright situation. Facebook is being proactive in this. What does that mean, though? What does it mean when we get our feed shut while we are commenting on CNN creating fake news? What is the effect of that?
Yeah, that's it's scary.
I mean, if we can't address when major corporations are doing fake news because they've got the line on Facebook, because they're able to have those conversations, well, there's an imbalance of power at that point. Now, is it Facebook's right to do it? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's their right. But just because something is your right. Now, again, I'm an individualist. I'm not a collectivist. I don't think Facebook should be doing anything for the good of humanity. But Facebook is not smart to incite a situation where they may get some competition.
Well, it kind of relates to what we talked about last week with the racism thing. If you were open a business and you were to discriminate against one certain group of people, guess what? Another business is going to pop up, open up the same almost identical model or whatnot, and just be open to those people that want to participate any way they could. And who's going to win? Who's going to outlast?
So let's talk about this, because the articles that we've shown so far, right? They were reporting on the engagement levels. Okay, that's an actual story. That's legit. The President Obama commenting. He did make a comment.
Yep.
He is the president. That is a legit story. That's something they're gonna do a story about, of course. The guy who took credit for Trump. Now, I think that's a bullshit story, but at least it's still a story. It is about a guy who's taking credit. Then there was a different class of story. And the first one of these that I saw came from U.S. News. Go ahead and throw up that analysis there. This was the first one that we woke up to. This was actually posted after the show, so posted at about 5 o'clock on November 14th, which was last Monday. And I want to take a look at these, Christian, because it's different. This is a different message. This is U.S. News and World Report. Establishment media, supposed to be straight down the line. The headline is, "Avoid these fake news sites at all costs. Millions of people read and share fake news or propaganda on social media without even knowing it." It's written by Rachel Dicker, who is the associate editor for social media. Now, this is an interesting headline. Avoid these fake news sites at all costs. Now, interestingly, on that list, guess who's on that list? We're on that list. Activist Post is on that list, along with InfoWars and some others. What was interesting about this particular one was that there were different classes of fake news. So you had basically hoax sites, which they said, okay, these are hoaxes. There were like 2 of those. And then there were like 2 or 3 satire, like The Onion. And then there were maybe 10 to 15. Activist Post was the very first one. It was in alphabetical order. And the category was propaganda. Now, we talk a lot about propaganda on this show. And of course, anything that's trying to present something, I mean, we are definitely skewed towards individual liberty. We are skewed in that direction.
Yep.
I was interested. I was like, who is this person writing this? And so as these started to show up, so here's Rachel Dicker. Here's her Twitter. as we go through this, I found some interesting things because for me, someone in the press who is suggesting that certain other members of the press are dangerous. I mean, the headline, avoid these sites at all costs. When you say avoid something at all costs, you are saying that thing is dangerous, that it is dangerous to your health and your well-being. That's why you avoid it at all costs. Now, the other interesting thing about this article is it listed all of these sites, but like, for instance, it didn't say, here's a link to an article from Activist Post that is clearly fake. No, it was just like, here's a list. Now, lists of dangerous people or lists of dangerous things without backup is something that we've seen throughout history. So it concerned me because I saw a pattern. So here's Rachel, associate editor, social media, U.S. News. Now, interestingly, I wanted to see the identity of these people because it blew my mind. So here we have Rachel, seems like a lovely person. She graduated from Middlebury in 2014, so relatively new into the game, and she's got a cat. So we've got how she sees herself, her job, her schooling, her cat, and little cute Frollo is the best Disney villain. Okay, next. Then this from Lila Alphonse, who is actually her editor. I just want to read this. This is off of her Facebook. The same story. She says, it's no secret. Now, this is going out on her Facebook to her friends and colleagues. It's no secret that I have a tendency to truth squad on Facebook. There are lots of fake news sites promoting content on social media and sharing their articles in quotation marks. Just makes the truth harder to find. I don't just mean satirical sites like The Onion or The Borowitz Report, with their silly send-ups of the news. I mean clickbait sites spreading hoaxes or left-wing and right-wing propaganda sites, spinning the news to appeal to their respective audience. Here are a few of the biggest ones, Activist Post being on there. So either, Christian, we are a clickbait site spreading hoaxes, or a left-wing or right-wing propaganda site spinning the news to appeal to their respective audiences. Funny about this, if you go on activistpost.com right now, or you go back and check our show, we have been critical of Clinton. We have been critical of Trump. Mm-hmm. If you go on Activist Post right now, I would say the majority of the top stories are critical of Trump.
Yeah.
In the same way that they were talking about Clinton and Wikipedia. So I don't know which it's not hoaxes, left and right-wing propaganda sites. But interestingly, she says, for a more comprehensive list, check out fakenewswatch.com. Now, can we show Fake News Watch? This is Fake News Watch. You can see, I don't know who created this. You could kind of look through these real quick. So what you have is you actually have these three sides, right? Fake hoax news websites. Those are all on the left. Then you have satire websites, and then you have clickbait websites. But we're all being grouped into fake news. And this is just a small list. It's in alphabetical order, but you could see Activist Post is on there. Coast to Coast AM is on there. Coast to Coast AM, bro. Which has been around since, what, 1984?
Exactly, yeah.
Art Bell and George Norrie, like, come on, man. You should avoid this at all costs. You should avoid Coast to Coast AM, which is syndicated all over the place. Well, what do we got is on here? Globalresearch.ca.
Disclose TV.
Disclose TV. There's much more. InfoWars is on there, lower sure. Down. So let's pop back over to that analysis thing. So let's take a little look at Lila as well and her identity in this, because it's important. Now just bear with me as we roll through this, because there is somewhere that I'm trying to go with this, and I find it very, very interesting. Let's go to the next here. This is her on her Twitter. Public service announcement: avoid these fake news sites at all costs. Next. So this is Lila Alphonse managing editor for news at U.S. News and World Report, previously of Yahoo and the Boston Globe. And she went to, I believe that's Syracuse grad, laughing in the face of the work-life balance. So she's all about her job at U.S. News, her previous employment, and her education. Also, one thing I found interesting on this, Twitter verified checkmark.
2,700 followers.
2,700 followers. Now, the Twitter verified checkmark is something that now they are giving out a lot more freely, but what it used to be for is it used to be for the verification of people who might have other people faking, like celebrities and whatnot, that someone else might fake a Twitter account pretending to be this person so you would know who it was. Now, here's what's interesting. I have, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times the followers of her have been on Twitter for a long time with at Vin Armani, if you want to go follow me. They refuse to give me a check mark. And yet, if you go and search Vin Armani on Twitter, I think most of them are gone, but like if you go on Instagram and you just type in Vin Armani, I think there's like about 6 or 7 fake Vin Armanis on there. Like, I'm actually somebody who has people faking being me. I can't get a check mark. But she actually applied for a check mark as though someone would be faking Lila Alphonse. Because the check mark is I guess it's very important. It's very socially important. I don't know. But I was surprised. 2,700 followers with the check mark.
Yeah, that surprised me too.
So next. Then we've got Vice, which I'm having a lot of problems with Vice News as of late. This one is by Nellie Bowles. She's going into how Facebook needs to fix. This is an article all about how they need to fix their fake news problem. They've got a fake news problem that came out of nowhere. All in this week, Facebook needs to fix their news problem. Like, in 1 week, this thing is just carrying. So let's see a little bit about Nellie. So this is her sort of describing what's in a Gizmodo article, but she says, this is her upset. And again, Nellie Bowles, checkmark. One source said high-ranking officials were briefed on a planned newsfeed update this is about Facebook, that would have identified fake or hoax news stories, but disproportionately impacted right-wing news sites by downgrading or removing that content from people's feeds. According to the source, the update was shelved. She's upset about that. She would like to see right-wing news sites removed. Never mind the fact that there are plenty of people who skew to the right politically. It's a legitimate place to be. You may not agree with them. You may have a difference of opinion with them. But instead of debating them, what you would like to see happen is you would like to see their content downgraded or removed from people's feeds, aka censorship. Now, what I find interesting is if you look at her photo, her Twitter photo there, she has a news camera. She's filming some news. She's been at Vice. She's been at HBO. This is a person in the press suggesting and advocating censorship. This is new. Let's see a little bit about Nellie, who she is, because I want to know. I want to know who these people are, because this is not just coming out of nowhere. These are people deciding to write this. So she's a reporter for The Guardian, covering Silicon Valley. She's worked for Fox. She talks about all the places that she's worked. UC San Francisco. She talks about her background, long little blurb about her education and her bona fides. She lives in the Castro, the historically gay neighborhood of San Francisco, with 2 stray kittens, Lovely and Egg. Very proud of her cats as well. Still, we've got the cat thing pop up again. So, the next story. Now, this one was interesting. This one was actually forwarded to me by my mother because Activist Post is on this list. The headline, this is out of LA Times. The headline is, want to keep fake news out of your news feed? College professor creates a list of sites to avoid. This was the original article written by Jessica Roy. Let's see about Jessica. Very proud of where she works. Very proud of her college education. Now, interestingly, remember as we go back now, in terms of non-college educated women, Hillary got blown out. She barely won among college educated women, but we see that this college educated woman is an interesting demographic. And you start to wonder what's happening. Well, and also lives in the historically gay neighborhood of city, actually, West Hollywood, historically gay neighborhood of Los Angeles. I've lived there as well. I loved it. Let's go ahead. And Christian, what I want to talk about, though, is I want to talk about this LA Times story because there's some irony here, okay? Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about this list by this college professor.
Right.
It's important, right? Because when you start drawing up lists of and making the basic suggestion, because the suggestion here, you can see what the suggestion is.
Yeah.
It's very you clear. Can see where the narrative is going. The narrative is we have a list. We have a list, and we want Facebook to take this list and to downgrade or remove the content from the people on this list. We made this list. Now, what is this list based on? What is this list based on? So,
really interesting stuff.
Interesting, right?
What I saw too is clearly they're saying that it's a threat. You know, it's a major threat. And we're clearly saying that we're not here to threaten you.
Well, whether we're here to threaten them or not, it's interesting because, that list in the LA Times story. So we don't need to go to the video, but let's show the LA Times edit. The story was recently edited. And here's the update, 2 days after it was put up. The professor who created the list has taken down the Google Doc. She had put it in a Google Doc, a Google document, and that's what they were using. She said it was a safety measure in response to threats and harassment she and her students and colleagues had received. She is continuing to work on it and plans to release it in the future in a format other than a Google Doc. Now, I want to address this. What we have here is a list. Activist Post was on that list. Created by a college professor. They write a story about it, okay? Then this college professor, probably because people who were on the list sent cease and desist notices. I know that that's what happened. She's saying threats. I know of at least 3 people on that list who had sent cease and desist notices. And probably some of those were sent to the university where she works. And I'm sure that the university said, you have to take this down because we're not going to get sued on your behalf. Now, she says those are threats and harassment. I'm wondering, did Jessica Roy ask her to send proof of the threats and harassment to her as a journalist before she put this up? Because here's the deal. Down below, there still is talk of many sites on the list are aggregators. They take news stories from blah, blah, blah. Breitbart is on there. Melissa Zimdar's put together a publicly available Google Doc, cataloging, boom, and talking about it's a list, and she's still linking to it. There's no list. The headline is, want to keep fake news out of your news feed? College professor creates list of sites to avoid. As of this moment, there is no list. And yet LA Times and Jessica Roy are not taking this story down. This is a story about a list that doesn't exist. Let me say it again. This is a news story about a now fictitious list.
Wow.
That's fake news.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fake news. Mm-hmm. You don't get to call out other people as fake news when the story is a fake news. It's a fake news story. And who is this professor? Who is this professor? Melissa Zimdar's is her name. This is from Zero Hedge. Zero Hedge was on that list. So this is meet the leftist professor who wrote the hit list of fake news sites. The mainstream media are going wild circulating a viral list of so-called fake news websites. And the list includes established news sites like, I believe that's WorldNet Daily, Zero Hedge, Breitbart, Red State, The Daily Wire, and Project Veritas. But WorldNet Daily has found a leftist, Trump-bashing assistant professor in Massachusetts who specialized in fat studies is behind the effort to target and discredit legitimate news organizations. So, who is she? Melissa Zimdars. This is her Twitter. There's the cats again. University of Iowa. TV lover, feminist activist, and forever Wisconsinite. Assistant professor in communication and media studies. She's got a PhD. She's only actually held that position at this college in North Andover, Massachusetts, at Merrimack College, for 15 months. She's a brand new professor. Brand new professor publishes this list because she didn't like the sites that her students were citing. But what's interesting is, doesn't she have a PhD in communication? I mean, are they not studying the freedom of the press anymore and how important that is? Like, is that not part of the study in communication and media studies? Like, how do you get a PhD and you're suggesting censorship? This is insane.
Insane. Absolutely insane.
Now, let's see the next. Go next here, and we'll see what she says. Now the list is gone. You could go to that LA Times story, and you could go ahead and click through. Now the list is gone, but Christian, while I'm going through this, why don't you go ahead and see if you can't get up our guest? So she says lack of author attribution may signify that a news story is suspect and requires verification. Some news organizations are also letting bloggers post under the banner of particular news brands. About Us tabs on websites are good. Bad web design, use of all caps. Christian, if you would, throw back to our fake news watch. Clickbait websites. I want to look at this. You know, as she says, bad editing, About Us pages. First off, on Fake News Watch, no About Us page. Found this interesting when you read clickbait websites. Clickbait websites are sites that take bits of true stories, but insinuate and make up other details to sow fear. S-E-W. That's actually not the correct word for sowing fear. It's S-O-W, which is like sowing seeds. So whoever wrote this site doesn't know the difference between sewing clothes and sowing seeds. But they can accurately go ahead and list off sites that are bullshit. And then the next sentence, most of these are conspiratorial in nature, are very unreliable. Grammatically completely incorrect sentence, but yet being recommended by people who are professional news editors.
Wow.
Do we have JD Sawyer from Aquaponic Source? Is he around? Make a phone call here and see if we've got him. Christian, can you throw back to me, to the main camera here while you get him? Go ahead and get him ready. So this is a very important issue. It's one that I want people to pay attention to. There's a very important reason why freedom of the press is listed along with freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in the First Amendment. Now, when the founders were putting this together, what we call the press now is sort of the media industry, right? That's what we call the press. But what they were referring to as the press was actually the physical press, the physical machine. And while we have a situation where, yes, these are private companies, they have a right to do what they want to do within their walled garden. And the government is not going in, and the government is not suggesting to take these sites down. But the president is making some notes about that. But I mean, he's gone. He's out of office. What I want you to think about is this. When the founders put these rights down on paper, when they enumerated these rights, the idea behind it was not just that it's wrong for government to infringe on these rights. The idea behind it was that these are important human rights, and that someone who has an ethical and moral basis and view of humanity is going to respect these rights. It's a very dangerous situation when people who have power, and yes, when you're an editor at US News, you have power. When you're an associate editor at the LA Times, you have power. I understand why there's this level of fear. I do. And Christian and I will talk a bit more about this. We'll jump into this. I do want to get to our interview, but we'll come back to this. We have a great interview today. And it ties right in. Honestly, it does, because it's about the individual being empowered and the rights of the individual. And one of the things that I found very interesting is a right that a lot of people are no longer take seriously is the right to produce our own food, something that human beings have been doing since the beginning of time, but yet so few of us do today. And there is an amazing technology that is something that I've wanted to share on this show, and I know that we'll be sharing more of it. Aquaponics, and we have a great guest. When we come back from the break, we're going to have JD Sawyer from the Aquaponic source of Colorado Aquaponics, and he is going to talk to us all about this technology, all about what it means, where the state of it is, and how it can improve your life. And we will do that right after this break. We'll be right back. So welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. I'm Vin Armani. We are streaming live on Facebook at facebook.com/activistpost. We are streaming on YouTube, youtube.com/Vin Armani. We're now streaming on Twitter as well via Periscope. So we are all over it. And we have coming up our guest for today, JD Sawyer from the Aquaponic source is here with us. JD, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Fantastic. Yes. So we certainly can. So JD Sawyer is the founder of Colorado Aquaponics, and as of the fall of 2015 is also the co-owner of the Aquaponic source with his wife Tanya. Since 2009, JD has been building and operating aquaponic systems while also providing education for schools and communities throughout Colorado and beyond. He's a lead instructor in the highly acclaimed aquaponic farming course, a 4-day intensive course taught at 3 different aquaponic farms around the country. JD and Tanya also created and still manage a 3,200 square foot hybrid aquaponics farm called Flourish Farm in partnership with the Grow House, which is located in an urban northeast Denver community classified as a food desert. The farm produces over 20,000 pounds of produce annually, donating a portion to the local community while selling the remaining produce to local restaurants and markets that are all within a 5-mile radius of the farm. The farm has proven to be self-sustaining financially and is one of the longest-running urban aquaponic farms in the United States. JD Sawyer, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
And thank you for coming on. Can you talk to us a little bit about? Well, maybe we could just start this way. Tell us, what is aquaponics?
Sure. Aquaponics is the raising of fish and plants together in a recirculating water system. And really, what you're doing here is kind of creating a polyculture, if you will, the byproduct of the fish waste, actually provides nutrients that are great for growing plants. And the third party to all this is naturally occurring bacteria that actually help to break down that waste and convert ammonia that fish produce through their waste into nitrates, which are great for plants. And so you're really creating a natural ecosystem where fish are helping the plants and the bacteria are cleaning the water. And by recirculating that water through this system, we can grow a tremendous amount of produce, especially, and fish, of course, too, with a fraction of the water, because we don't discharge that water. We continue to reuse that water over and over again. So it's a very powerful way to produce food in a very resilient system.
So I guess that's a lot of information, and I guess we'll break that down as we go through here. So for the people who who have no green thumb and basically know very little about this, as opposed to, say, traditional farming or gardening that's in the soil, this is essentially a soilless. That's the first thing, right? That so this
Right.
isn't in the ground.
That's correct. Yep.
But then some people, I guess, and especially now with the marijuana industry growing, a lot of that is done with hydroponics. But
Right.
this is different than hydroponics because why?
Well, and I'll tell you too, I'm not a green thumb. At least I wasn't when I first got into this. So, if for those of you even considering this, we teach and you can learn about this. And one of the things that drew me into this in the first place was, I have a bad back, so the thought of tilling the soil and weeding and all that kind of stuff in my backyard didn't last very long for me. In this concept of soilless gardening that can be done oftentimes at waist height was really appealing to me and is appealing to a lot of folks that are interested in getting into this. But in terms of the difference between aquaponics and hydroponics, certainly the most obvious difference is we're raising fish in the system. And so again, the fish waste are providing the nutrients for the plants as opposed to providing nutrients in hydroponics through synthetic fertilizer solutions that have to be regularly replenished. And in hydroponics, there's often a wastewater discharge that has to be accounted for as well, because those nutrient solutions can actually build up a lot of mineral salts in the system, and so they have to be flushed regularly, which creates some wastewater discharge as well. That's really not an issue in aquaponics. And so the fish are a natural source of fertilizer for the plants. And the nice thing is that, we can raise edible fish in the system too. So you're growing not only your plants, but you could grow fish like tilapia or catfish or trout. We raise hybrid striped bass as well. And these are fish that you can consume. So now you have really a complete meal, if you will, a healthy protein source in the fish and all your vegetables and produce all in one system.
So basically what I'm hearing is we've got a system where we're growing plants and the fish poop basically is the plant food. Is that what it is? So we have a fish tank, the fish poop becomes the plant food, the plants eat that, then the plants are cleaning the water and it goes back to the fish. That's essentially what's happening?
Yeah, that's essentially what happens. That fish waste or fish poop gets broken down or we like to say mineralized in the system, and oftentimes particularly in home-based systems, the plants grow in that soilless media that you touched on earlier. These plant beds are usually about 12 inches deep, and we fill them oftentimes with little clay pebbles. Hydroponics folks know them as hydroton. And the water from the fish tank actually gets pumped up into these plant growing beds, and then it floods and drains or ebbs and flows through all of that clay media there. And then the waste can actually get broken down into those plant beds, and then the bacteria can further mineralize that into elements that trace elements and minerals that the plants can uptake as nutrients. So it's a very efficient system.
So before we get into more of the sort of technical side and obviously how people can learn more, why don't you tell us a little bit? You said you don't have sort of a agricultural or green thumb background. When did you get into this? How did you get into this? What attracted you to it? What was sort of the thing? Because now it's obviously a giant part of your life. So what captured you and made you want to adopt this as such a big part of your life?
Sure. Well, in 2009, like a lot of people, I was laid off. I used to work at a university as a director of operations, and my wife and I had just had newborn twins. Actually, we were only 2 months old when I got laid off, and we were thinking about what our kids are eating. Can we start farming and growing our own food on our small piece of land? And that's when I started exploring. And I sort of relented when I got into the backbreaking traditional labor of farming, and as we were exploring some options, Tanya at one point said, well, why don't we just turn we had one of those swimming pools that you can buy at Walmart. She said, why don't we turn the swimming pool into a fish tank and we'll raise some fish? And so we started poking around on the internet, and that's when I stumbled across Aquaponics. And at the time, there weren't a lot of people really doing this, at least not maybe publicly, maybe more under the radar. But it was a little bit more widespread in countries like Australia that have large drought issues. And so, I jumped on some forums in Australia to learn more about aquaponics. And I started poking around and going to a few places around the country just to see what people were doing. But again, it was very limited. And then right around the same time, I read an article in the Denver Post that started talking about this neighborhood in northeast Denver that was a food desert neighborhood.
What is a food desert exactly? Yeah.
Yeah, so the food desert, this community lacks access to healthy food. There's no grocery stores within a 2.5 mile radius of this neighborhood. It also happens to be one of the most polluted zip codes in Colorado. It's largely surrounded by industry and commerce. So there's no grocery stores there, yet there's a multi-generational community that lives there, and they struggle with access to healthy food, which leads to all kinds of issues, sourcing food from places like 7-Eleven, just basically junk. And that leads to childhood obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and the rates of these issues are much higher in communities that lack access to healthy food. So, I was reading this article, and first of all, I hadn't heard of food deserts either, and so I was interested in the concept, and then it went on to talk a little bit more specifically about aquaponics, this raised bed, soilless gardening type of system that may be a solution to food desert communities. And at that point, I was kind of all in. I was really drawn into the whole concept, not only for my own purposes and my own family, but to see if there's a way that we could provide this to support communities in need.
So this is the Flourish Farm that you're talking about.
Right.
So, okay, so let's talk about from a food standpoint, because you got into this, and I think that's the way that most people that I've talked to who are into aquaponics that they're really, it's about the quality of food that's around, especially in urban areas, is really bad or ultra expensive in terms of if you want to eat something that is kind of the equivalent in health to what would be the average thing on the store shelves 60 years ago or something like that, in terms of what there was in antibiotics and hormones and pesticides, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So can you talk to us about the difference in terms of, say, food that, let's say, you just go and you just buy whatever it is off the shelf, or God forbid, some processed food from a convenience store, to, let's say you go to like a Whole Foods, you get that organic food, to the difference between that and food that you particularly have grown and are feeding your children from out of an aquaponic system that you own and control? Like
Sure.
what is the difference in that spectrum?
Well, I'll try to touch on that in a couple ways. For one, and a lot of people have probably heard some of these data points, but it's often the case that the average distance from which your food travels from the origin of the food to your plate can be 1,500 to 2,000 miles. So even things like this typical leafy greens and healthy food that you might find at a Whole Foods type of store may have traveled some great distance, which of course has a tremendous carbon footprint, a tremendous cost associated with it. There's a lot of issues, and I won't soapbox on all this. I think you guys are savvy on this, but our food system is largely corporate controlled and centralized, and that model is not sustainable. It's not going to work, and there's a lot of things that can disrupt that system too. So the idea of localizing our food production allows us to actually grow food in the neighborhoods, in the cities, in the communities where people need this food the most. And I just heard a statistic the other day. I think it was by 2080, over 80% of the world's population will live in cities.
Yes, yeah,
And
I've
so-
heard that as well.
Yeah, so we've got to figure out how to grow food local to the consumer as much as possible. And one of the things that does for you, in addition to reducing all these food transportation miles and packaging and all that stuff, is that you get a fresher, healthier product. There's a process called senescence, which is basically from the moment that the product is harvested. We'll just talk about a head of lettuce, for example. From the moment that you harvest that head of lettuce, it will start to lose its nutritional value.
Right.
So you can imagine that if this head of lettuce has to go on trucks and packages and sit on shelves and all this stuff, that by the time it gets to the store shelf, it might be, 50% of its nutritional value may be lost. If we can produce that food locally, the opportunity to be able to consume that product much quicker is going to provide for a healthier product for the people that are consuming it. So you already mentioned earlier.
No, hold on. I hate to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but I do want to back up because I think that there's
Yeah.
an important point there.
Yeah.
So even if somebody says, well, I only eat organic, I buy everything at Whole Foods or whatever, you're saying that there is still, because whether it's organic or not, whether the production is certified organic or not, if it's traveling a certain distance, if there's a certain amount of time from when this plant is alive, living, attached to whatever it is, and then by the time it gets to the store and you take it and buy it and take it home and consume it, that there is a nutritional value that is lost over that time.
That's correct.
That's
Now,
something
what
that a
that
lot
is-
of people don't understand. A lot of people don't understand that, and I think it's really, really important for people to know. And this has changed over the last 100 years. The distance that food is traveling is absolutely insane.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's a point, even as 60, 80 years ago, you either farmed your own food or you knew the person who farmed it, right? And it was a local aspect to it. And now, we teach a lot of children and kids that come through the Grow House, the nonprofit where we work, where does food come from? And, they say, oh, the grocery store. Well,
Right.
not really, right? So, yeah, I mean, not only do you lose nutritional value, but, just that freshness, that flavor, all of that is gone. And put aside the scientific stuff for a second. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. We sell to, in addition to what we donate to our community through the Grow House, we sell to high-end restaurants and chefs that are all within 5 miles of the farm. And, they'll be the first to tell you what the difference is between a product that we produce right down the street versus something they may ship in from California or Mexico. And it's undeniably clear. And I'm not even a chef, but the product, the taste of the product is just that much better. It's healthier, fresher, crisper, and again has more nutritional value. So it's just kind of a win-win across the board.
And how much food are we talking about here? Like, what is the difference between, if somebody says, so let's say they have a little garden plot, right, in their backyard or whatever, and let's say it's maybe, I don't know, 20 square feet or 40 square feet. What's the difference in terms of the amount of food that they can generate out of that space with soil gardening, or as opposed to if they were to put an aquaponic system in that same location? What's the difference that we're talking about?
Sure. And that's a tricky one to answer, but one of the advantages that aquaponics has is that, for one, we often do these in controlled environments, greenhouses, or a lot of folks will do this in their basement under lights. So you have the opportunity to grow year-round in most cases. Again, if you can control the environmental factors appropriately for the plants especially, you have the opportunity to grow year-round as opposed to seasonal production. So you have an advantage right there. The way, particularly when we scale up into the farm systems, we can very precisely space the plants from the one hole to the next, if you will. We oftentimes float the plants on water in a system called deep water culture, and so we know exactly how many plants per square foot, and we can space them just as efficiently as possible, which is much more difficult to do in traditional row-based, soil-based plots, if you will. So one metric I heard just recently, because we just built a farm for the mental health center in Denver, and there's a 1 acre outdoor farm, traditional soil-based farm, adjacent to the greenhouse with our aquaponic system. And the soil-based farmers are projecting to produce 10,000 pounds of produce on 1 acre.
Okay.
We're going to do 20,000 pounds of produce in a deep water culture system that's 1,800 square feet.
Wow.
And
so 1,800 square feet is like 30 feet by 60 feet. That's almost nothing.
Yeah, it's not very big, but the things that influence those numbers are, again, opportunity to go year-round in the greenhouse, which they don't have, and very tight plant spacing. We can't space them too tightly, because then they might have other issues. If we space them too tightly, they stunted growth or fungal issues. But we've worked that kind of stuff out to get the optimum spacing and the rotation. And when you're running these systems the way we do, we're optimizing the water, the amount of fish and the nutrient balancing to make sure that these plants, they're getting these nutrients 24/7 through the water. They're not having to search for nutrients or water in the soil and all that. So the growth rates can be much higher.
And there's fish involved as well in the aquaponic system. And so for somebody who's interested in getting into this, I mean, you got into this initially to feed your family, right? And
sure.
Can someone who, like, let's say they've got a home somewhere, they've got their backyard, they say, I want to put this in. I mean, what percentage of what's, say, currently on the table for dinner or for meals, what percentage of that, in terms of the produce, in terms of the protein, what percentage of that could somebody realistically, if they really wanted to dedicate something to this and get an aquaponic system up and running, what percentage of that could they no longer be buying from the store and be sort of picking fresh from their own aquaponic system?
Well, you could certainly do 100% of all of your leafy greens, fruiting crops, herbs. These are all things that you can grow in an aquaponic system. And so, part of that's going to depend on the scale, the size of the system that you put in, to make sure that you have enough space to grow the amount of food that you would need, particularly vegetable-based foods that you would need on a daily or weekly basis. You're probably not going to eat fish every day,
right?
And so that's somewhat of a more limiting factor. So you're not going to necessarily get a whole complete diet out of it. You might want to eat meats and chickens and other things too. But in terms of produce, vegetables, if you scale it and manage it appropriately, you could grow 100% of your food, no problem, and offset that part of the grocery bill at a minimum.
Well, and have the most, especially for somebody who has a family and who has kids. I mean, to have
Right.
the most healthy vegetables possible, right? I mean, the it couldn't can it get any healthier than that, really, right?
No, and there's an aspect to this as well that, I mean, my kids like kale, which I don't know
Oh,
about you.
lucky you.
When I was growing up, I mean, kale, I mean, I didn't even heard of kale for one, and I wouldn't have gone anywhere near it, when I was a
Right.
9-year-old, 10-year-old. But they actually really like it. And to be involved even in seeing, and being responsible for growing your own food is a very powerful thing. And that's where particularly the educational side of this is really important to us, because we do a lot of work with schools, and when you bring fish into the classroom, everyone gets excited. It
Right.
engages kids, and all these science, technology, engineering, math, the STEM subjects are all interlaced in aquaponics, which makes it such a powerful learning tool as well.
Interesting. Let's talk about that, because I think that there is, beyond just the health aspect, there is this sort of intangible, and I think you just touched upon it. This sort of, and we're very big on these sorts of concepts. But can you talk to us about, and I do want to, we'll definitely talk about the sort of educational side, and I think that this is a good intro to it. You do a lot of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and can you talk to us about how people's attitudes, this is a difficult question to ask, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do people's consciousness change in terms of their relationship and maybe the power that they feel in their own life, having the knowledge that, hey, like, I'm growing my own food. I'm not dependent on this corporate chain of agribusiness, as you were talking about. I'm not dependent on all these other things. Like, here is this resource that I've sort of taken back from my life. Can you talk to us about, like, how that changes people, or what people have said to you, how it affected you yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of folks that come to us, that want to learn about aquaponics for a wide variety of reasons. Maybe they're just retiring and they want to do something and stay busy, and but a lot of folks come to us too for very specific health reasons as well. And yeah, it's an incredibly powerful thing to take control of your food. Certainly folks that are into self-reliance, for whatever the motivations that are out there, to be able to grow and take control of your own food supply is arguably the most important thing you can do.
I would agree with that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to feed ourselves and provide shelter and water, and so we're talking about the very basic necessities of life here. So it is kind of just sort of innately part of your core to be able to know how to grow your own food. And again, we touched on this earlier, we've lost touch with that. Over the past 60, 70 years, we've largely lost touch with that. So in one respect, we're really trying to get, especially kids, excited about agriculture again, and innovative agriculture and growing food. And when you plant a seed, and you see a fish swimming in a tank, and all of a sudden things start growing, and there's all these biological chemical relationships going on, and in this ecosystem, you're creating a balanced ecosystem here, and you're responsible for managing that, and responsible for making sure the fish stays alive and the plant grows. Yeah, that is a very, very powerful feeling. Now, again, we touched on this a little bit, but we often quote Buckminster Fuller, and I'll probably get it slightly wrong, but rather than fight the existing model, just create a new model.
Yes, yes.
And that's kind of the essence of what we're doing here. Rather than fighting, big agriculture and Monsanto's and all that kind of stuff, which is difficult to do, just grow your own food. and create your own system and focus on that, or grow food for your community and help support your community in that way.
So let's talk about, you've talked about having kids involved, which I think goes to some idea that this is not what people may be interested, but they may be like, oh my God, how hard is this going to be for me to get started on this? It looks complex, but this is something that you do education even with kids. I mean, how long does it take for someone to get a grasp on this and to learn how to set up an aquaponic system, or to grow, or to, I know that you guys actually offer some pre-built systems at the Aquaponic source, but I mean, you do also education in terms of construction of these. How difficult is this? Is this a relatively easy thing to learn?
There's a learning curve. I wouldn't say it's easy, and it does take a commitment to learning. And so what we try to do is focus on getting people in the class first and foremost, just or read a book, or just take any classes that you can, so you can just work, whether it's us or other folks around the country, that you can kind of immerse yourself with another grower that has some experience, and ask questions and just get a feel for how the system comes together. Not only how to manage it, like managing the plants and the fish, but how to build it and plumb it and provide the necessary power and heat. It's kind of like aquaponics is like the ultimate DIY project. We get a lot of do-it-yourselfers that want to build aquaponic systems, which is great, and we teach people how to do that. And because you've got plumbing and electrical and construction and weights and all this bearing loads, and everything is kind of all innately in one system here, which makes it a very exciting thing for people that like to build and tinker. So, in that aspect, it's just such an awesome thing to do. And I don't know. I mean, it just growing your own food in general is it's just incredibly powerful. I sort of lost the last part of what I was going to say, so you might have to jump in.
Well, so you at Aquaponic Source, you guys offer some classes if people wanted to travel to Colorado. How are the classes laid out if somebody wanted to go and train with you guys?
Yeah, and I just remember what I was going to add to that. I mean, from a time standpoint, it might be a couple months. I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's in particular, I'm an experiential learner, so you can take as many classes as you want, but ultimately you got to build something, and whether you buy a kit or you build your own thing, and you've got to run it, and because that's how you're going to learn, and you're going to make mistakes. It happens. These plants might be nutrient deficient. You might kill some fish. It's sort of, it's part of the learning process, and so that can take several months of just tinkering and really finding the balance and what works and how to optimize the system. So that was the part I wanted to touch on. But yeah, we offer anywhere from 1-day classes like aquaponics basics and build. Just to cover the fundamentals, plant health, fish health, bacteria health, how the system flows and what components you need to build it. And then we'll actually build a little do-it-yourselfer kind of system in class. So that's a great place to start, and aquaponics basic and build. And then we have a 2-day immersion course, which is a little bit more of a deeper dive. So you could spend the weekend with us, and we'll go tour the farm so you can see larger commercial scale aquaponic systems, and we'll delve into a lot of the science behind these systems in much more detail. And then we get into really the commercial side of farming. I like to think of it in buckets. There's home scale systems, and then there's kind of community or commercial scale systems. And so we have some classes that focus on what it means to scale this up and run this as a business. And that's, kind of a whole nother ball game, because you certainly have to be well versed in aquaponics, but then you also have to be well versed in typical, small startup business practices, making sure you have a business plan, a marketing plan, you understand your customer base and distribution and all of the other aspects that go into running a business on top of the aquaponics system itself. So we can go, very deep into that subject matter, because we want to see this, be impactful. And that's going to mean larger farms, community or commercial scale farms that are going to have to be, again, in these cities and communities to really have an impact on our food system.
So yeah, I mean, that's another very interesting. You got into this, and then you started a business, and it has grown the business now. It's the business has encompassed and sort of put together.
I lost you there. I don't know if
you got me back now. I think we had a little drop there.
Yeah, start again.
Okay, so you got into this, and it grew into a business, and that business grew, and so for people watching, this is something that if someone wants to take it on and they fall in love with it, that there is actually some money to be made in this. And I mean, you guys are doing it in Colorado. I mean, with your making sales to local restaurants and whatnot. But obviously, there is a lot of space for this in this country and in other countries. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, food production, for all the reasons we've touched on, is critical. And again, water conservation, the fact that we can grow a tremendous amount of food with a fraction of the water is hugely important for just about any country, municipality, any region. And so this is going to be a powerful part of the equation as we move forward to try to sustain life on this planet. Is there money to be made? Sure. Is it hard? Yeah, it's still farming, and it's risky. Things go wrong. We talk, very openly about our failures and learning moments as we, delved into larger scale production. And, we really recommend that people start small. Start with a home scale system, really understand the ecology and how you manage the system, and get comfortable with that before you just go launching into some big commercial operation, because there is a capital investment.
Sure.
And you're at the end of the day, you're growing kale and lettuce and things like that. These aren't big high ticket items either. So you have to really manage all aspects of the farm system and the business to be able to turn a profit.
Sure.
So there's just a lot of variables that influence profitability in aquaponics. Scale is certainly one of them, and you have to be careful, because there's a lot of people out on the internet saying, oh, you have to be at 10,000 square feet, in order to be profitable. No, you don't. It's not. It depends on your markets, your efficiencies, your motivation and passion to succeed, the price points you're able to offer your product for, and the cost that you're able to produce it at. And there's a lot of things. We're a 3,000 square foot farm, and we're profitable. I mean, it's modest profit, but the fish and the plants pay the bills. And that was awesome. One of the major things we wanted to prove when we got into this, is can this truly be economically self-sustaining? We know the system, the water conservation and the environmental aspects are tremendous, but can it actually economically sustain itself? And the answer is yes, but it depends, on a lot of factors.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So I'm sure that a lot of people are now very interested in this. So if they want to get more information, I know that you guys at the Aquaponic Source have a wealth of information, videos, you have your courses, you have systems, you have all of that. Where do they need to go? What should be their first stop if they want more information about what you guys are doing or aquaponics in general?
Yeah, so a couple resources I'll give you all. Certainly the Aquaponics Source, and there's on our resources page there at the aquaponicsource.com, we actually have a community site, which is a free forum site, and that actually has over 16,000 members all over the world, which is a great place to see what other people are doing with aquaponics. So there's tons of videos and other people's systems and sketches and designs and photographs and just forum information where you can ask questions and get responses from aquaponic growers all over the country. So that's a tremendous resource. And yes, we have a whole listing of classes. We're getting ready to launch our or announce our 2017 course dates. So, check in the next week or two, and we'll have all that on the website. And we're getting ready to launch a new line of re-engineered home systems as well in 2017. So there's a lot that we're ramping up for to be able to offer some better solutions for homes and schools and commercial systems. ColoradoAquaponics.com is also our original company, and that website is still active, and so we have some resources and information on that site as well.
Great. Excellent. So, JD Sawyer, I want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing with us this super powerful technology. I'm sure a lot of people are turned on to this. I know the first time I heard about it and got a good idea of what it was, I was all about it. And I think you've probably converted a lot of people. So please, if you're interested, the aquaponicsource.com, please head off and check out the resources and maybe even head on out and take a class with JD himself. JD Sawyer, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vin. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
So, Christian, go ahead and hang up on him, buddy. Thank you. All right, man. So that was cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Did you...
Really cool. Really good information.
Did you know anything about aquaponics?
Not really.
Before this?
Not before this week. And I think it's a super powerful technology. It's just a matter of you got to go through a little bit of courses to understand it and stuff like that. But
well, I don't know. Yeah, see, here's the thing. You could go do a course, but honestly, some friends of mine who have gotten into this, there's a great book. The original, so JD and his wife Tanya bought the aquaponic source from a woman named Sylvia Bernstein. She wrote a book. The reason why I ended up having him on was because of this woman, Sylvia Bernstein, who's now sort of retired from aquaponics out of the industry. But there's a book called Aquaponic Gardening. You can buy it at the aquaponicsource.com. You can buy it on Amazon. That was actually recommended to me by a friend who had built his own aquaponic system just off that book.
wow, yeah, that's cool.
And there's a ton of YouTube videos and tutorials.
It's a super powerful technology that sounds like it's pretty simple to do. Obviously, there's some technicalities and stuff too, but
sure. Well, as with anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me the promise of this and why I've always considered it so interesting is, there's, and especially it's interesting in the community as people start to wake up, right? One of the things about waking up is it's scary.
Yeah.
Right? It's that metaphor of like going back to like the movie The Matrix,
Down
right?
the rabbit hole.
Down the rabbit hole. But it's like if you look at the metaphor of sort of taking, is it the red pill that wakes him up? I guess. It's
one of them.
Right. One of those, whichever pill gets you out of the Matrix, right? Whichever pill gets you out of the Matrix. When he takes that, what then happens as he literally wakes up is it's painful. It's disorienting. It's scary, right? The world that you wake up into, it's a scary world.
Yeah.
It's the real world, right? And I think that, there is a place as people wake up. I think that the people who reach our show and who reach, say, like Activist Post have come to a place that is a little more, what I would like to say it's kind of a next step from like a Alex Jones. I think Alex Jones has been I use him just as an example, right? I think he's been very effective at waking people up.
Yeah.
He was certainly a part of my awakening.
Right.
And I think a lot of people. And people like David Icke and whatnot, you know what I mean? They are part of that awakening. But they are also very happy because they are part of that awakening to sort of live in that space of fear.
Right. Yep.
Right? Where
that's still going down the rabbit hole. It's not the awakening. It's not the true awakening.
Well, it's the beginning.
Yeah.
It's coming into the new, like, it's disorienting, right? And that's a place to be. But the fact that when you know that there are these technologies out here, so it's like, oh my God, like it could all collapse. And like, what about food? How will my family eat? And it's like, here's this knowledge. Because really, aquaponics, you take somebody like JD, who, as he said, this is since 2009, right? So it's not like this guy's been doing this for 20 something years, but at this point he's an expert,
Yeah.
So that is to say that, yeah, there is a learning curve, but I mean, this is 7 years, right? And he's like, I don't have a gardening background. This is not, he came into this from the same way that a lot of people would come into this. Like, I want to do better for myself, for my family, my children. And what you got to think about is, like, even if you took away all his aquaponic systems right now, you took away all the equipment that he's got, everything, he could build and reconstitute another one. It's up here.
Yeah, that's great.
Once it's here, it can never be taken. Yeah. That's the power. That it's like, if everything fell apart, he could find out of whatever and put together
That's awesome.
a system,
Love it.
That is the type of knowledge that is so empowering.
Yes.
That's what changes people's lives.
Yes.
And it's yes, your life is changed by the actual, of course, the results, the having the organic, fresh. How much more fresh you imagine you go out and your salad was just you're picking your salad off.
Doesn't get any more fresher.
Doesn't get fresher than that, right? I mean, you're eating the fish, and the fish were alive 15 minutes before you threw them in the oven or on a pan or on the grill. It doesn't get more fresh than that. This is how human beings used to eat. This is our this is really our birthright. Yeah. And it's reclaiming that. But so, of course, that's powerful. And of course, you get the results and the reward from that. But the reward that you get and the result that you get from knowing that you can do it.
Yeah, that's a whole nother level. It really is.
How much fear it eliminates from out of your life.
And one thing I really appreciate, and I like to reference this, and it goes back to a couple shows that we talked about this, the resistance phase. And you mentioned it right now during your speech too. But one thing that JD said was not to fight a flawed system, to create your own. And
this is our next show. We've got Peter Kallman actually back, and we are going to talk about agorism and get into that, because that's basically what the solution is the idea that here are these technologies, be it Bitcoin, be it aquaponics, all of these things that we as individuals can do to take back control. We talk about the globalists are doing this, the Illuminati, the corporate, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is, we've reached a point now where we have enough resources where we don't have to complain. Yeah. Which I think draws this whole thing back, because here we are sitting, right, doing a show, and the folks at Activist Posts, behind their computers, researching, writing articles, and that has become a threat to the behemoth, right? The corporate. I mean, look, we do a 2-hour show. Right, we do a 2-hour show. I mean, we've got a few little bells and whistles, and we're adding on more as we go. But some things about that 2-hour show: one, it's just you and I. Yep. It's just you and I. Two, it's funded by us. Mm-hmm. It's funded by us. It's out of our own pocket. The gear, the space that we're in, even our noisy neighbors from time to time. Right. It's just us. And we have control. Yeah. And this 2 hours, if we decided we want to come and do 2 hours tomorrow, we want to do 3 hours today, or 6 hours, or 10 hours, it would be completely up to us. Mm-hmm. And you know what? It would cost us the same amount. Yeah. We're empowered in that way. How much money does it cost to put on 2 hours worth of programming on CNN? Yeah. When you do if you took the yearly budget of CNN, right? Yearly budget, and then you said, okay, divide that by 365. Now divide that by 24. That's going to give you 1 hour of programming. We just did an hour. Mm-hmm. There's no money flown. It's probably millions of dollars, dude.
Easy.
Well, an hour's maybe $100,000, $200,000. Who knows?
Oh, I thought you meant yearly.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yearly. I mean, yeah, yearly. It's probably hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of their budget overall. So you could see why we would be a threat. Mm-hmm. You could see why aquaponics would be a threat to agribusinesses like Monsanto, right? Mm-hmm. Which is one that everybody complains about. Monsanto's putting glyphosate or whatever, glyphosate or whatever in their Roundup, right? They've got pesticides in the food. They're genetically engineering the food. And it's like, okay, well, here, aquaponics.
Create your own.
Just grow your own. Mm-hmm. Stop whining. Stop whining.
That's the.
Are you really concerned about it, or do you just want to whine?
That's the enlightenment into the embodiment.
Right.
That's exactly what it is. And that's where you get your control back. And
exactly. Well, and here's the thing. Us sitting here independently doing media, independently informing our community, mm-hmm. and we being a threat, fake news. These people are threatened. These individuals are threatened. And I want to address that because they are also, it's part of their awakening as well.
Absolutely.
Because they've been asleep. Because here's the deal. I get it. And I think maybe we'll end with this. Christian, I want to thank you very much for everything today. You know, we showed our little piece on the fake news, and I did want to delve into who are the individuals who are the most threatened, the most scared of what's coming, and what we represent. And I understand that we represent that. I understand that we at Activist Post represent that. I understand that Christian and I represent that. I understand that, you know, the guys at Stash Crypto from last week with the Bitcoin represent that. JD Sawyer from the Aquaponic Source, who I really want to thank for coming on and sharing, also represents this movement of taking back our individual power and the recognition of individual power. But what I also recognize is this, and I want to have some empathy. I don't want to come down on what it turned out to be in the particular grouping of articles that were calling for the censorship of people like Christian and I, and of people like Activist Post. I don't want to come down and say, oh, these people should be harassed, or these people are the real fake news. Because I want to have a little bit of empathy, because I understand. I get it. I imagine spending years of my life operating under what we could only call a mythology. That's not to say it's not true. It's not to say it's not pragmatic. It's just to say that it's sort of a fiction created. And the idea is this. I'm going to go to a good university and study there. I'm going to study journalism. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to get a job, hopefully in some up-and-coming section of journalism at, say, a Yahoo or Boston Globe or some maybe smaller outlet. And then I'm going to build up my portfolio and my bona fides, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to get a job at the LA Times or US News and World Report. And that will make my life have meaning, because these are important institutions. These are institutions that matter to the world. Institutions that in these last months have gotten everything wrong. Important shit wrong. And I can empathize. I can empathize with being in a situation where your mythology crumbles around you. You know, I can only imagine that it's got to feel a lot like people who become disillusioned with a religion, say, who were raised all their whole life in a particular religion, and then something happens where they lose faith. And in that first moment, that first loss of faith, it's really what we're seeing is we're seeing a grieving process, right? That first stage of denial. It's denial. It can't be real. It can't be real what I'm saying, can it? It can't be real what Activist Post is saying. It must just be fake, and they've convinced everybody. Never mind the reality. These are the same outlets that said it would be a miracle if Donald Trump won. The same outlets that said Donald Trump had a 98% chance of losing. But it must be fake news. It must be propaganda. But go back through today's show. Go back through the interview that we just had with JD Sawyer of Aquaponics Source. Was there anything fake there? Anything fake? And if this was the first time you've heard of aquaponics, and you see it in action, and you see somebody who's doing it, and you can go and do it yourself for real. You can go and tour these farms for real. You can eat the vegetables and the fish for real. So you tell me, U.S. News and World Report ever report on that for you? How about the LA Times? But that's real. And that's really empowering for you. It's really a chance for you as an individual to take back control. And I get that we are, a lot of us, asleep, and we're walking through this mythology. But food is real. Money is real, as we talked about with Bitcoin. So I think if this thing continues, the fake news, that what I would implore the people who are writing these stories is to stop and think. Like a human being. Stop and look at the actual stories that we are putting out. Stop and look at the information that we are putting out. Because we want to empower you too. It's not just about me. And yeah, okay, I get it. You know what? Your degree in journalism isn't going to help you build an aquaponics system. But are you going to use your degree in journalism to squelch our voices so that no one can build those systems? Because let me tell you, the only reason why I'm sitting here and Christian's sitting there is because you're not telling the truth. If you were telling the truth, if you were telling these stories, if you were empowering us all, there would be no reason for me to be here. There's 1,000 things that I would rather do. But I'm here because it's kept me awake at night. That I have knowledge and I have information that can empower other people that's not being shared by the mainstream media. And I'm not going to be awake at night with a sense of guilt that I didn't share. That's just how I am. So we're going to share it, and we're going to continue to share it. And those of you out there, if you like what we're doing, share it. Because this is real news. And it's real information. And the best thing you can do is share it. You can do that by going to our archives on iTunes and Stitcher, getting the podcast. You can do that by going to youtube.com/Vin Armani. You can follow me on Twitter @Vin Armani, where we're streaming now, and you can go and like Activist Post on Facebook. And go and do that, because Facebook is one of the ones that they're targeting. Activist Post on Facebook, facebook.com/Activist Post, where we stream every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And our next guest next Monday is Peter Kallman, who we've had on before, ambassador from the Mises Institute. We are going to be talking about agorism, which is what our guest today sort of got at. It's this concept that we are not going to complain about their system anymore. We're going to build our own. And we want to build it with you. We want to show you how to do it, inform you, and show you, at least, I hope, how to think instead of what to think. So that's our show for today. I want to thank JD Sawyer from the Aquaponics Source for coming on. I want to thank our great content partner, Activist Post. I want to thank my co-host, Christian Reyes, and we will see you next Monday. Thank you.